Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the first video I'm making, so I just want to talk about today who I am and why I'm making this channel, and hopefully see if there's any interest from the community, if people want me to make more. So first of all, I call myself Lazy Eye Bitcoin Engineer. I'm a software engineer with like 10 years of experience in big data and all sorts of things. I did 3 years at Google, and what I really want to do is fill a gap that I see in the community, where a lot of the YouTubers and bloggers and podcasters are not really technical. And so I think there's a lot of subjects that are covered well, and I don't want to get into those things like the news and the rumors and the debates about the philosophy and the trading and all these things. But I feel that there's a niche that I can help fill with respect to the technical aspects. I first bought Bitcoin in 2013, and right now I'm actually a co-founder of a ETH startup. And my goal here is to educate newcomers. I really feel that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I've been talking to my friends and family a lot and giving them my perspective, and I want to share that perspective more widely. And I also want to record these videos for my friends and family so that I can just give it directly to them and have them, they can watch it over and over, and if they have questions, they can watch it again, or they can get back to me and help me refine it. And I was kind of inspired because of Peter McCormack's interview with Pieter Wuille. I really liked the tone of it, and I'd been thinking about making this channel for a long time, but McCormack kind of just put me over the edge because I really appreciated the way that he was engaging, and the fact that he kept repeating that he was not technical made me feel like there's a purpose that I can serve. And I also was just reminded that there's a lot of people on the other side who are willing to engage, and they're not just sock puppets, and they don't have bad motives. They just have trouble looking at the other side, because we all have that trouble, right? You have your team, and people get emotional and they attack each other. It's painful when you go to the other side and you go with an open idea and you just want to engage, and you do so in like a good faith way, and then you're attacked, right? So I really want to try to get rid of that and address that a bit. And I want to, just help people recognize that basically, if you're not engaging with the other side, you're self-brainwashing. We all should be engaging with the other side. Like I'm a big contributor on the BTC subreddit, which is the Bitcoincash subreddit for those who don't know. But I also subscribe to /r/Bitcoin, which I was banned from at this point, despite that I was contributing there since 2013. And I also subscribe to /r/Butcoin, which are basically just the crypto haters. And I post on there sometimes. I'm usually downvoted, but if you want to test your ideas, you really have to engage with the other side. Like, it's funny to me that in the West, we say that we're scientifically minded and we believe in science, but, the whole thesis of science, or the whole idea behind science, is to test your hypotheses. And, if you are out there putting forth some idea, or, you have some conviction, some belief, but you're not actively testing the counter belief, then don't call yourself a scientist. You're not scientifically minded. You're idealistic. You're dogmatic, right? When Peter McCormack was engaging with Pieter Wuille, I can't remember what part of the podcast it was, but he mentioned some point, and he said, well, Pieter Wuille kind of pushed back against it, and then Peter McCormack said, well, listen, you can't invalidate that because that's my experience. And I found that to be something that maybe is very compelling. And as a software engineer, you know, in the scale of Asperger's, he sort of thought, you know, we tend to overemphasize facts and underemphasize feelings, and we tend to underemphasize other people's perspectives and argue in a way that is not really helpful, because people who are not technical, they can't necessarily engage with these ideas about hash and proof of work and cryptography and all these things. So I just want to tell you my story, and maybe that will give some idea about, you know, what is my feeling towards Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, because there's this idea that, you know, Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin. And I want to tell you, not in a technical way. I'm not going to prove anything to you by reading the white paper and all that, but I want to just tell you my story and how I came to believe that Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin, and I became a supporter of Bitcoin Cash. So in 2013, late 2013, right before the Mt. Gox explosion, I discovered Bitcoin. I think it was a Max Kaiser video that I was watching, whatever it was. I was alerted to this, and I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. Of course, I was immediately skeptical, especially as a software engineer. I mean, you know, obviously, you can't make something scarce online, right? You can always make a copy. So that's immediately, I was immediately skeptical. But, you know, I found that people were paying for this thing, so maybe there's some legitimacy to it. And I went out and started doing some Googling. So I found the white paper, I read the white paper, and immediately I was compelled. For me, I can just read the white paper. I did actually have to review a few things, like hash function, well, not hash functions, but some of the details I had to go brush up on just to be sure that I understood it. But once I fully understood it, I saw the brilliance of it immediately. And I started becoming very excited, like I lost sleep level excited. I didn't stop talking about it. I made my friends and family crazy. But before I really got super excited, I actually had to do my own due diligence. And the nice thing for me is I'm a technical person, so I can do that on my own. I don't need to rely on other people to tell me, you know, how this thing works. So I went on the subreddit, I read as much as I could, I asked a lot of questions. I found some old posts of mine where I was asking kind of silly things about how transactions are signed when they have multiple inputs and things like this. I found the block size limit. I mean, obviously, as a software engineer, you can immediately see that this system where if everybody's going to have a copy of the database, you immediately start worrying about bandwidth and especially disk space, right? So that's immediately a problem, and you start thinking like, what if somebody spams the system and just fills up these blocks, and then all the miners go offline because they run out of disk space? So, you know, I obviously thought about that. I discovered that there's this 1 megabyte cap, and then furthermore, you know, realized that, well, that's a solution for the short term, but that doesn't really help us in the long term. So, like, you know, you're claiming that this thing can scale to the world or whatever. I had to go and verify on my own that it was possible. So I did that, right? I did back of the envelope calculations. I asked questions until I was satisfied personally. And I'm not going to try to prove to you. This is just what I believed at the time. I believed at that time in 2013, late 2013, that Bitcoin could scale to the entire world. So I bought it at that point, somewhere in the range of like 160 to 250. I think I bought multiple at that time. It was like November or December 2013. I then basically continued to promote Bitcoin for the next 5 years. You know, after my initial excitement died down and I annoyed all my friends and they called it a Ponzi scheme, and I went and read all the, you know, the criticism from Jamie Dimon and, you know, in the New York Times and things like this. I then, you know, continued to basically promote it for 5 years. And at that time, the promotion was, you know, it's actually kind of a similar feeling to today when I try to talk about Bitcoin Cash. But when I would talk about Bitcoin with people, they would just think I lost my mind. You know, they would say that I'm an idiot, that I'm involved in a Ponzi scheme. They'd say, you're going to be careful. They would tell me that it's going to be stolen or it's going to be duplicated or whatever. And for me as a technical person, I can read the white paper and I know that that's not true. So when Jamie Dimon says, well, it's digital, so it can be copied and it's not a limited supply, I would just sort of chuckle. And it was very amusing to me that I was like reading in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, that Jamie Dimon, you know, he's the head of JP Morgan, for those who don't know who Jamie Dimon is, or he was the CEO. I think he still is. You know, it was very interesting to me that I knew more about a new asset class than Jamie Dimon. You know, that was really a cool experience for me. But yeah, basically I did, you know, what I see as free PR work for Bitcoin. I promoted it a lot on the subreddit. I was always engaging with newcomers and saying, you know, at that time, our Bitcoin was, well, first of all, everybody was on the same page. Everybody was friends there, and there was a lot of newcomers with like very basic questions. And when I would see those, I would answer, and I would try to be, you know, as forthcoming or as forthright as I could be. You know, saying both the good sides and the bad sides, right? Like, this thing is going to be difficult to scale, but blah, 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 blah. Or, you know, this is how digital signatures are done, or this is how you should manage your keys, like those kind of things, just to help out and do some promotion. So fast forward 2015, 2017, you know, I started becoming nervous. Oh, and by the way, you know, with respect to the 1 megabyte limit that I was worried about in the early days, I found not only that I thought that it could be increased from my own analysis, but I also found that Satoshi Nakamoto, Gavin Andreessen, sorry, Gavin, I don't know how to say your last name right now, and Mike Hearn, they all supported, all the 3 engineers who had ever contributed any code to Bitcoin at that point, all supported an increase to the block size. So I figured, all right, you know, this is where I'm at. I seem to be aligned with the technical people. So, you know, we're good to go. I'm going to buy into this, right? And by the way, Mike Hearn actually worked on the same team as me at Google. I never met him because I started on that team like a year or 6 months after he had quit. But I did get to see some of his code there, which was kind of cool. But anyway, in 2015 through 2017, you know, I started becoming increasingly nervous. There was suddenly this large faction of supporters who didn't want to increase the block size. And at some point, Gavin was forced out or quit, and Mike wrote his devastating blog, and he quit. And I started really losing my faith in Bitcoin. And it's during that time, I think it was sometime during those 2 years that I bought Ethereum, actually. I bought about as many dollars as I had put into Bitcoin in 2013. I multiplied that by about 7, and I bought that much Ethereum. You know, like I said, since then, I've also in the last year started an Ethereum company, or an ERC20 actually is what it's driven by. So, you know, I've kind of been driven out of the community in some sense, and I'm not really able to support Bitcoin like I used to be. And today, you know, now after having supported it for years, sadly, like I'm not able to onboard my own parents because, to me, BTC Bitcoin is a dead end. I don't want, my parents can't handle the risk. They're not active traders. Like, they're not going to be doing this every day and trying to, you know, get out when they can. If I'm going to get on board my parents, they're going to be having some sort of a cold storage solution, and they're going to be holding for 2 to 3 years. I don't think, you know, in the long term that BTC Bitcoin is something that I would recommend for them to hold. BCH Bitcoin, you know, I trade it myself and I do hold some now, but it's also under the threat of a hash attack now. So, you know, this is going to be my 3rd cycle, and, you know, we're in the accumulation phase, and I want to onboard people, and I can't. You know, that's my story, and I think, you know, what I want people to understand from that is, you know, why the BCH community is never, ever going to concede the name Bitcoin. Because to me, BCH Bitcoin is what I bought into in 2013. That on-chain scaling was good enough to get us from $0 market cap to $1,000, you know, per Bitcoin, a $21 billion market cap. Like, it's very strange to me that that plan was good enough to get us to 21 billion and then sort of suddenly became not good enough. And, you know, BTC now has taken the reins of, or taken the responsibility of that market cap. And to me, it's kind of absurd because I never would have bought into it. I never would have helped drive the price. I never would have held through all that time. I never would have bought it if I had gone onto the subreddit or into the community and found out that the 1 megabyte cap was meant to be in place forever. I mean, that to me would just be absurd. Like, you know, I worked at Google and we talk about scale there a lot. You know, to have a piece of software in the modern world on the internet which has artificially capped scale is, yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, that's absurd. I just want to I want to remind everyone kind of, and the one point I want to make at the end of this is that, like I said earlier, if you're not engaging with the other side, you're self-brainwashing. And it's painful to go onto the other side because, especially if you engage actively and ask questions, you know, you are going to be called names and stuff, and you're going to be downvoted. Who cares, right? It's Reddit karma. But you really have to do that. Like if I find that I'm talking to you and I find that you believe that everything said on our BTC is a scam and is a lie, I know that there's no point in engaging with you any further because I'm not going to get any nuanced perspective. I'm not going to get any new ideas. You're just going to be parroting what I've already read on /r/Bitcoin. I already know what's being said there. I already know the narrative. If you want to sell me on BTC Bitcoin, you know, you're gonna have to come over to my side and engage and understand what are the perspectives, right? And so I just want to remind people, like, if you're engaging with someone that's a BTC supporter, you know, for the Bitcoincash supporters out there, if you're engaging with somebody that's a BTC supporter, just remember that it's, you know, it's difficult to tell the difference between a sock puppet and a shill and someone who's just sincerely had a different experience, right? I mean, if you are not technical and you come to the Bitcoin space and you see that all the exchanges believe that BTC is Bitcoin and the name Bitcoin stayed with BTC, then, and the price, right? I mean, obviously that's another whole discussion, but you know, that stuff is all going to add legitimacy to the arguments that are being made by the BTC side, right? So just remember that. And another thing for the Bitcoincash community is be careful to engage in these sort of things. Actually, the Bitcoincash community is probably the better one. This is for the Bitcoiners, and this is also for the buttcoiners. This argument style where you say, you know, person X or person on X team said this dumb thing, right? Therefore, X is stupid, right? It's so weak style of argument. I mean, maybe there's a legitimate purpose to say something like that if you're talking about, you know, somebody who is actually a leader. Like if they're the head of Blockstream, then yes, that's a legitimate case or that's a legitimate point to make. But if you're just going to pick somebody's comment out of a subreddit and shit all over them for saying something dumb, like you've not proven anything. You've just proven that you're a jerk and like you're not willing to engage in an honest way. You're not arguing in good faith. You're just playing chimp politics, like pointing the finger at the other team and throwing feces, right? So try to keep that in mind. And for the future, what I want to know, if people are interested in this channel, is like what subjects you'd like me to talk about. So I think what I really want to do is try to walk people through the white paper. It would take some time. I need to give you guys a model of like what a computer is and how it works, and you know, we're going to need to understand Big O, which is a pretty big subject. But I think that, you know, Richard Feynman said, if you can't explain an idea to anybody, you don't truly understand it. I think that I can walk pretty much anybody through this if you're willing to take the time, you know, put in the time to actually go through it with me. So that's, I think, what I'll do. But I could also talk about my critiques of the Lightning Network. I know Pieter Wuille had his top 5 critiques. I actually had my own top 5 that I was posting on Reddit for a few months, and I was curious to see if Pieter had stolen any of them. I haven't actually tried to line them up to see if they're similar. I know a few of them were similar, although he worded them differently. But I'd like to talk about that if people are interested. I can also talk about specifics of the Lightning Network. We can talk about the security model. We can talk about the scalability, although those are sort of like, obscure technical things. And, I'm not really sure if that's going to be compelling to people. I could talk about the feasibility of 1 gigabyte blocks. If you haven't seen Pieter Wuille and Andrew Stone's talk about scaling to 1 gigabyte, and you're going around telling people that 1 gigabyte blocks are infeasible, you're not going to convince me. Put it that way. Whatever side you're on, you owe it to yourself to watch that half hour of YouTube. If you're out there engaging on Reddit or on Twitter or whatever, and you haven't seen that video, and you're making statements about the feasibility of scaling on chain, well, you're not fully engaged. You're not looking into the other side. You're not looking at the legitimate arguments that are being made. I can talk about ZeroConf. I can talk about slightly more abstract things. Like I can talk about startup culture and fear and how that relates to, Bitcoin and hard forks and soft forks. Or I could talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So I'm coding an Ethereum ERC20 every day now. So if people are interested in knowing like why, how I can support both at the same time, I actually think there's space for both Bitcoin and Ethereum. So if people are interested in understanding really deeply what are the differences between Ethereum and Bitcoin, that's another thing I can talk about. So in conclusion, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments, what you want to talk about. And I hope you learned something today. Thanks.